And so what we do to protect forests that we have is incredibly important. And there's a carbon lever, there's a nature lever, there's a protesting lever, there's a native forest lever, there's an Indigenous lever, huge Indigenous lever. What do we do to protect them? We've also got to roll back and regenerate them. That's incredibly important, but hard to do. You've got to bring all sorts of things together, because if you want to create a new forest, you're trying to create a new ecosystem, or at least restore the ecosystem that was once there. And so our wonderful organiser of this interesting affair has a story to tell. And he wants to come up and share that with us very briefly, because I think we're almost out of time in this session. But he's running it, so it should be all right.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you, Geoff.
Can I sit on your chair?
Oh, that's
I'd be
big.
very, very, very privileged.
Be careful.
And thanks, Rob. First of all, I got to apologise for your photo being the wrong photo. And
yeah, I've lost some weight, grown some hair since those days.
I got to tell you that the designer made one mistake, and it crept into the system, and we got it everywhere else. Every other banner out there has got the right photo on it, but this one, and we have no idea how it got here. Because we picked it up really early, so that shows you when you're trying to organise an event with 220 faces and titles. And Ria, you asked a question before, what were you doing up here with these esteemed people? And one of the things about SIM-PAC was I was trying to get the different voices, the different pieces of the puzzle, and to bring them all together, and then each of those sessions be one piece of the bigger puzzle. And the piece that you brought was incredibly important. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you for contributing 10% of the audience as well. So I wasn't going to speak in my own conference, except I told Ria a story the other day. She asked the question when she was talking to me. She said, "Tell me about you." And I said, "Oh, well, I've got a little story to tell about forestry." And it's about, I'm a New Zealander, you probably picked that up from the accent. I spent 10 years as personal private secretary to the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jim Bolger. And at the very time, 1997, at the very end of his tenure, the Prime Minister and I sat down and we had listened to some of the conservationists in New Zealand about the logging of native forests on the west coast. And we said it had to stop. There's no such thing as sustainably logging a podocarp forest which takes 500 years to regenerate. It's just not one of those things. We've got lots of exotic forests in New Zealand. We should stop logging a native forest, and it happened a bit later. But what happened is it lined up the Jenny Shipley against Jim Bolger, and I remember being in this meeting and Jenny Shipley storming out of the meeting late at night in the Prime Minister's office. The next time she came back in the morning, she had the numbers to overthrow him as Prime Minister, and he was gone. And I remember it was over forestry. And as I was getting 10 years of my life, I was getting thrown out of the beehive, and it was rough. They took your keys and your swipe card, and they sent you out into the world. It was like, this is my home, It was like, and just before I left, the phone rings, and I picked the phone up, and it's from renowned conservationist in New Zealand, Stephen King. Not the novelist. Stephen's a long-haired person, bare feet, man of the forest. Him and his brother sat up to trees in Poriora Forest and stopped the logging. They camped up 120 foot off the ground, and they hid in the trees. And so the loggers didn't know which trees had humans in them. And so they stopped the logging, and the government eventually bought the whole forest back. And now it's our last native forest in New Zealand with a podocarp forest. And he saved that. So Stephen King says, "It's Stephen King." I say, "Hi, Stephen." And he says, "Geoff, it's your destiny to go and restore a forest." I said, "Oh, okay, Stephen. Okay, thanks." And I was like, as I'm getting thrown out of the beehive. So a very short time later, I got the opportunity. And what it was is we had a native bird sanctuary in New Zealand at Mount Bruce. Pukaha Mount Bruce was the original indigenous name of it. And it had so many pests in it, wild cats, rats, ferrets, stoats, possums, that all the native birds were gone off it. And the forest was being ate. The possums will do more damage to our native forests than logging, by the way, at the moment. And I put a sponsor a hectare, and we raised money from the public and it was the first time ever done in New Zealand, to pest control on Crown-owned land. It was against the legislation. We had to get regulations changed for it to be able to happen. And we raised all the money to get rid of the pests. But also I wanted to leave a legacy, and I wanted to leave a vision. 500 years is a long time. You give your money to restore something, you've got to wait 500 years to see the result. So I got together and I said, let's make a CD of native birdsong and this of how the forest sounded before European occupation. And so I got together tape dating all the way back to the 30s. Some of it was on copper wire, it was that old, of all these native birds. Some of them are extinct now. And we produced a CD called Pukaha Songs from the Forest. And you can listen to it on Spotify. You can buy it online. It's a gold, I think it's platinum winning.
It's an absolute bargain, is it?
Yeah, it's $20 or something. And the money, because the money goes to restore the forest. And it's still the #1 fundraising thing today. And so at the ceremony, and this is completing the circle, at the ceremony they finally opened the cages and let these endangered birds, some of them were down to, when they got the Chatham Islands robin, they were down to 3 birds, and they brought it back from extinction. And they opened the cages and they let the birds fly up into the Pukaha forest in Mount Bruce. And it was no fences involved, but we got the farmers involved, completely surrounded by farmland. So we started trapping on the farmland. We got all the farmers in a room and said, this is what we want to do. They all bought in. They were just like, yeah, we're here. A lot of them sponsored pest control themselves. And so we pest control so nothing could get in, and we released the native birds. And today, the native bird life doubled every year. It doubled. It went up by 100% per year. And so now you go into that forest, you can hear it from several miles away, and it's just alive, and really important birds in there. Our native forests in New Zealand can't regenerate without 2 birds. There's the native pigeon and the kokako. And because they're the only birds that can eat the seeds, because the seeds are really big, and distribute them to regenerate the forest. So our complete native forest ecosystem comes down to 2 birds, one of which was critically endangered and bred at Mount Bruce. Now the birds are bred there, and now they're spread. And to open it, the Department of Conservation said, who do you want to come along and open it? And I said, it's got to be Stephen King. And so he came along, and he was so proud of me. He couldn't believe it. And I'd restored that forest, and he had called it out as my destiny. And so that is my story, Ria, about, and I've got the recording. I don't know if they can play it. Can you play it up the back there? We're gonna go now, and we can listen. Okay, this is the Maori blessing in the middle. Can you play some of the other birdsong? And we're going to finish this, and you can listen to some of that birdsong. But if you want to listen to it, it's very peaceful. It follows the actual natural rhythms of the dawn chorus, and all the birds are in their correct places. And also, we took a picture of the birds, and we told the Maori bird law story. So all of these birds, here it is. And so all of these birds in the booklet that you buy with the CD is their indigenous story, the legend of all of these birds. And that was something I did, and I never had it in my head until one person challenged me and said it was my destiny. And I think that's within all of us. And it's obviously in you, Ria. And it's obviously in all you people. You've got a love for trees and what we're doing. So thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much. I think that wraps it up as best as we can. Thanks very much, Geoff. And